Hi, and welcome to our message for June the 13th. We won't have a supplement again this week. We are starting a series of four messages taken from the New Testament book. It's a letter called the Letter to the Hebrews, and it's usually called just Hebrews, and I think let's do that. Um, and I'd love to launch it by going right to the end of the letter. Well, not quite the very, very end, but almost the very end. So, chapter 13 and verse 8 says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. And I've already suggested recently in these messages that that particular verse can act as a kind of a stabilizer and a reassurance as we go through this post-COVID lockdown restrictions emergence phase as churches and people are talking, well, when are we going to get back to normal and all that stuff. Here's what we know. The world has never stopped changing. It's always changing. The church has never stopped changing. It is always changing. Life just is like that. It's not static. So how about this for a stabilizing point, a sort of fixed point that you can keep your eye on and live by? Everything changes, but Jesus, being the character that he is, God's character, is the same. So, yes, how we follow Jesus changes. We've been doing it for 2,000 years as the church. It's bound to change a lot. Um, but who we are following and the core principles of following that person actually remain the same. Yesterday, today, forever. You can never say that about the church. It isn't today what it was yesterday. It won't be tomorrow what it is today. Jesus, it is who we look to for security and stability. Anyway, the letter itself, leading up to that point. See, I'm starting at the end because, well, I would, wouldn't I? But what's behind leading up to this conclusion? Well, the letter to the Hebrews is a very particular letter. Years ago, the suggestion was made when our kids were the right age and we were to pass through Florida with enough time on our hands, then we should go to Disney World. It took every ounce of grace that I could muster. I admit that I don't have much, but I had to scratch around for every little bit of it to agree to this plan and try and make it happen with a smile on my face. Um, to me, it was like I just agreed to my worst nightmare. And, I'm probably a bit over dramatic, but there we go. And I was just dreading it. And I was feeling a little bit proud of myself as a dad, going, well, this is going to make this sacrifice to make my children happy. I loved it. I think I probably had the best time. I don't know. But I loved it. Which just reminds me, and I need to remember this, that my prejudices are a really bad basis for judging anything in life. That the impressions I've got about things can be so far from what is true. And I haven't even finished discovering what's true about me by a long, long way. So, yeah, be willing to give it a go, I think, something like that. Okay, what's my point? My point is that the letter to the Hebrews uses the Old Testament. It's a New Testament book, but it constantly is immersed in the Old Testament. And I find that people generally don't really like the Old Testament, don't really like the God that they find in the Old Testament. Um, New Testament, most people go, yeah, that's all right. And pretty much everybody goes, well, Jesus is great. But that Old Testament and God in the Old Testament, I don't care for that at all. And I would say, actually, whoa, 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 whoa. Where did you get that from? I can see where some of it comes from, the violence, the tedium of some passages and so on. But actually, no. There's a whole Disney world of fun and entertainment, and actually challenges that are fun to face, and actually excitement and memories and things to visit which are just awesome. So allow the letter to the Hebrews to convert you to becoming an Old Testament enthusiast, Something that you think, well, I don't think so really, Chris, thank you. Go for it. Okay, so we're going to try and do that with the letter to the Hebrews, which comes to its highest point, I think, possibly, at that statement, Jesus Christ the same yesterday and today and forever. Highest in the sense that that gives me something really fixed, firm, and great to depend upon as I try and negotiate the changes and face the challenges I face as a pastor of having to try to persuade people who to face the facts of change. Anyway, let's get back to the letter, because it's quite important that we see that any of us can actually read this letter, find its meaning, and actually be set on fire by it. It's awesome stuff. So you sort of think, well, Chris, if it's really largely draws from the Old Testament, that's going to be boring, tedious, and I don't understand it because I don't really know the Old Testament. Let me tell you, you already know most of what you need to know. What's going to happen is the letter to the Hebrews will treat part of the Old Testament story of the people of Israel moving from slavery through the wilderness of difficulty to reach for the promised land of glory and hope and milk and honey and so on. It's going to use that as a picture for the Christian life. If you've ever sung more than 10 Christian songs, you will almost certainly have done exactly the same thing. Which is to use that adventure to speak of and teach us about and help us explore the adventure of following Jesus. The adventure really begins with Abraham. An elderly couple, Abraham and Sarah, are told by God, you have no children, but you're going to actually be the parents of an entire nation, and not just any nation. Your nation will be the one that gives the earth a very particular blessing that will be good for everyone. And then it fast forwards, so to speak, or we do in our mind, to this journey through the wilderness of this ancient people who had been slaves for generations, who left the land of slavery under rather strange circumstances. Then the biggest army in the world set out to get them again, to sort of kill some of them and take the others back into slavery, and pinned them, as it were, against an uncrossable Red Sea. Miracle of miracles. God enables them to pass through the waters, but he does not enable their pursuers to do the same. And so they reach this crisis point from which there's no going back. They pass through something and they come out the other side. And Christians have always used that to say, do you know what? The waters of death that so threatened them turned out to be the water of life and of their saving by God. Like baptism represents that this mystery that is right at the point of death, in fact, and through death, that in actual fact, the way out of our slavery to all kinds of things is given to us, and we can embrace a new freedom and journey following our Moses, who is Jesus, the new Moses, one greater than Moses, says the letter to the Hebrews. Now, as they journey across the wilderness, they hit various challenges, and the writer to the Hebrews takes just one or two of these and uses them to help us see how we, in following Jesus, like they followed Moses, we follow Jesus, hit moments of truth, moments of crisis, moments which are important in some way. And that negotiating those moments by the one who's the same yesterday, today, and forever is exactly how to get through, and to get through well, and how we can discover in this ancient story of this journeying people headed for their ancestral home, our own story of leaving behind one life and heading for the next, heading into this wilderness experience where in fact we're more alive than we were when we we were more static and stable, because then we were just slaves. It was actually a prison. Sometimes it feels more secure to be in prison, but it was a prison. And now we are free. And sometimes freedom feels uncertain and unsettling and risking too much change and too much that's going to be different. But actually, the message is, yeah, but that's okay. You've got a good leader in Moses. God gave them Moses to handle all this stuff. And God's given us Jesus. And we're not following Moses. He led them across a physical wilderness. Jesus, by the power of the Spirit, leads us across the wilderness of life's challenges, griefs, disappointments, injustices, opportunities, joys, sorrows, pleasures, everything that makes it rich and everything that makes it tiresome and difficult. Jesus is the one we follow. He's our new Moses. And we also pass through the point of death. Baptism symbolizes it, to emerge into a new kind of living. And along the way, we meet moments which are visited in the letter to the Hebrews. For example, when God took them to Mount Sinai and said, okay, I've rescued you, and now I've got a calling to give you. How about, I will always look after you, and you and ordinary people will represent me to all other ordinary people. How about that? You can't represent me by being specially anything, because you're just the same as everybody else. You'll represent me in a particular way. I'm going to give you these laws. They'll become known as the laws of Moses, or the laws of ancient Israel, or the Old Testament law, or the Torah. I'm going to give you these laws. That's going to help you build a society which is more just, fair, compassionate, which limits violence more than any other society around you. You'll stand out for good qualities, and you will be a people who love their neighbour as themselves. And you will also worship me in a very distinctive way. And we'll major on that so that you can represent me to people. We'll major on the justice of your society and the care with which you will worship me as your love responds to my love for you. Now, you're going to get it wrong, and because you're going to get it wrong, I'm building into the agreement. In the Old English, the Testament, we say agreement or covenant or relationship, agreed relationship, contract maybe, deal even. So here's what we write into the deal. When you fail, when you betray me, when you ignore me, when you take my guidance, when you take my provision, when you take what I give you but don't give me your respect, your care, your thanks, your love, your faithfulness to this deal, I am going to forgive you. And I'll build into the system of your worship a system of sacrifice. Now the writer to the Hebrews says, folks, all of that is a picture because actually there are lots of things about that which are very, very unsatisfactory. But if you'll take it as a picture for us now with Jesus, who is our priest and our sacrifice, who is our Moses and our leader, who is our provider, then you'll see that this Old Testament narrative, this story of this ancient people on their quest, will feed your spirit and help you negotiate life as a Christian in a world of change and trouble. And the writer to the Hebrews unfolds this, and that's what we're going to be looking at a few bits of in the next few sermons. But I want to just come back to these words. Hebrews 13 verse 8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. As those ancient people travelled across the uncertainties and hazards of an arid land, where it was difficult to find water, difficult to get food, difficult to survive enemy attack, difficult to do just about everything, as they journeyed there, God was consistent. And Moses, their leader, sought to be consistent. He wobbled around a lot, but it was a pretty tough job. We have in the new Moses one who remains consistent, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. It's he we're to be faithful to in this time of change. We're going to see lots of change, The world is changing, and we're going to change too. But what doesn't change is who Jesus is fundamentally, and who we are fundamentally as the followers of Christ. That's what we're called to be, and to be ordinary people who represent God to other ordinary people. Nothing special about us, but we have been called to follow a particular way, not a set of laws as the ancient people were, but as we saw last week, the law of the Spirit of life, whole freedom filled with possibilities. Folks, God bless you as you live out this week, and do have a read of Hebrews. Some of it will seem very strange to you at first, but I promise you it's great stuff when you get to it. You just need to, a bit like Disney World, I promise you there's wonderful stuff there that you would never imagine finding yourself enjoying. It's really good, honest. Okay, see you next time.